Commander Zexthul sat in the cold metal chair, his forearms shaking even though he tried to keep them still. The recording device on the table glowed red, waiting for his words. The debriefing room had white walls and bright lights that hurt his large black eyes. He had been in many battles across the galaxy, but none of them scared him like the war with the humans. The other Coalition officers watched him from behind the glass wall. They wanted to know what happened on Kepler 442b. They wanted to know why their mighty army lost to a small group of primitive creatures from a backwater planet called Earth. Zexthul knew they would not believe him, but he had to tell the truth. He cleared his throat and spoke into the recording device. His voice was rough from screaming orders during the battle. My name is Commander Zexthul of the 47th Assault Fleet. I have served the Galactic Coalition for 32 standard years. I have fought the crystal beings of Vega Prime. I have battled the metal warriors of the Centauri system. I have seen entire worlds burn under our weapons, but nothing prepared me for the humans. He paused and rubbed his main set of hands together. The memory still made his skin crawl. We thought it would be easy. The reports said humans were weak. They had soft skin and only 2 arms. They lived short lives, and their technology was simple. Command told us we could take their mining world in 3 days. We brought 50,000 soldiers. They had maybe 800 humans on that rock. Zexthul's voice got quieter as he remembered the first day of the attack. Captain Jake Morrison was their leader. We knew his name from intercepted communications. The humans called him Iron Jake because he never gave up. We thought it was just a stupid nickname. We were wrong. The alien commander shifted in his chair. Even now, months later, thinking about Morrison made him nervous. The first attack should have ended it. We dropped from orbit with our best shock troops. The humans had built simple defenses around their mining complex. Stone walls and metal barriers. Nothing that should have stopped our energy weapons, but when we landed, something was different. Zexthul closed his eyes and saw it again. The moment when everything changed. The humans did not run. That was the first sign that these creatures were not normal. Every other species we fought would retreat when faced with superior numbers, not humans. They stood their ground and started shooting back. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the recording device. But it was not just that they fought back. It was how they fought. Our soldiers are trained to follow orders and stay in formation. Humans seemed to think for themselves in the middle of battle. They moved like they could read each other's minds. When one human was hurt, others would cover for him without being told. The commander's second set of arms began moving as he talked, a nervous habit from his species. Private Lisa Chang was in the first group we encountered. She was small even for a human female. Our intelligence said human females were weaker than males and would not fight. Chang proved that intelligence was worthless. Zexthul's voice grew tight with fear and respect. A plasma bolt took off her left arm at the shoulder. She should have collapsed. She should have screamed and begged for medical help. Instead, she used her remaining hand to tie a piece of cloth around the wound. Then she picked up her weapon and kept fighting. The alien officer stood up and walked to the window. His reflection looked back at him, showing the scars he got from human weapons. For 3 hours, Chang fought with one arm. She used her own blood to mark enemy positions on the walls for her squad. When we tried to flank her position, she threw explosives with deadly accuracy. Our soldiers started calling her the Bleeding Demon because she would not die. He turned back to the recording device. But Chang was not unusual. All the humans fought like that. Sergeant Ben Parker held a choke point for 6 hours straight. When his ammunition ran out, he used rocks. When he ran out of rocks, he used his bare hands. Private Tony Miller crawled through our lines with both legs broken, planting bombs that killed dozens of our troops. Zexthul sat back down, his forearms wrapped around his body. We started to realize that humans do not fight just to win. They fight like death means nothing to them. But that is not right either. They know they can die. They just do not care if it means completing their mission. The commander's voice became almost a whisper. On the second day, we captured some humans alive. I spoke with a young soldier named Steve Hayes. He had burns covering half his body and 3 broken ribs. But when I asked him why humans fought so hard, he smiled. Actually smiled with blood running down his face. Zexthul shuddered at the memory. Hayes told me something that I still do not understand. He said humans fight for things that cannot be touched or held. Ideas like freedom and honor. He said dying for these ideas was not death, but victory. How do you defeat an enemy that thinks losing their life is winning? The alien commander looked at his hands, remembering how they shook when he first heard those words. By the third day, our troops were afraid to advance. These humans, these creatures we thought were weak, had killed over 3,000 of our soldiers. Our weapons were better. Our armor was stronger. We had air support and orbital bombardment. But every time we thought we had won, more humans would appear from nowhere. He stood up again and paced around the small room. Captain Morrison seemed to be everywhere at once. Our scouts would report him on the east side of the complex, and then he would attack from the west. He knew exactly where to hit us to cause the most damage. But it was not just his tactics that frightened our soldiers. Zexthul stopped pacing and faced the recording device directly. Morrison talked to his troops during battle, not orders or commands, but encouragement. He would tell them they were making their families proud. He would remind them of their homes and their reasons for fighting. Our soldiers fight because they are told to. Human soldiers fight because they choose to. The commander's voice grew, stronger as he continued. On the final day, we surrounded the last human stronghold. Only 40 humans were left alive. We had 2,000 soldiers ready to finish them. Command ordered me to demand their surrender. I opened a communication channel and spoke to Morrison directly. Zexthul paused, remembering the conversation that changed everything for him. I told Morrison his situation was hopeless. I offered him and his people mercy if they surrendered. I expected him to negotiate or beg for terms. Instead, he laughed. He actually laughed and told me that humans do not surrender when they are protecting something important. The alien officer's hands clenched into fists. Then Morrison said something that I will never forget. He said that every human who died on that world died free, and that was worth more than living as slaves. He thanked me politely for the offer and told me his people would see me in hell before they gave up. Zexthul's voice cracked slightly. The final battle lasted 18 hours. Those 40 humans killed another 800 of our soldiers before the last one fell. Morrison himself took down 27 of our troops in hand-to-hand combat after his weapon was destroyed. Even when he was dying, he was still fighting. The commander sat down heavily in his chair. We won the battle, but we lost something more important. We lost our confidence. Word spread through the coalition fleets about what happened on Kepler 442b. Soldiers who had never shown fear before started asking questions about fighting humans. He looked directly into the recording device one final time. That mining world was supposed to be our easy victory. Instead, it became our warning. Humans are not like other species. They do not fight for conquest or survival. They fight for ideas that make no sense to us but mean everything to them. That makes them the most dangerous enemy we have ever faced. The recording device's red light went dark. Commander Zexthul knew this was only the beginning of his testimony. He had much more to tell about the humans and their terrifying way of war. Commander Zexthul took a deep breath and activated the recording device again. The red light glowed as he prepared to tell the worst story of his military career. His 4 hands trembled as he remembered the 3 months that changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. After what happened on Kepler 442b, High Command decided humans were a real threat. They sent me to lead the attack on New Geneva, their biggest colony in the Tau Ceti system. 50,000 coalition troops against 8,000 human defenders. The odds were perfect. We thought it would be over in a week. Zexthul stood up and walked around the small room. Even now, the memories made him restless. New Geneva was a beautiful city before we arrived. The humans had built it in a green valley with mountains on 3 sides. Clean white buildings reached toward the sky. Parks and gardens filled the spaces between homes. It looked peaceful, almost innocent. We did not know we were looking at the most dangerous fortress in human space. The alien commander sat back down and folded his arms. Colonel Amy Rodriguez was in charge of the human defense. Our intelligence said she was a supply officer, not a combat leader. We thought the humans had given up and put a clerk in command. We were very wrong about Colonel Rodriguez. He paused, remembering the first day of the siege. We surrounded the city and demanded surrender. Rodriguez answered our call personally. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She spoke to me like we were old friends having coffee. Very polite, very calm. Then she told me something that should have warned us about what was coming. Zexthol's voice grew quiet. Rodriguez said that New Geneva was home to 20,000 human civilians. She said every man, woman, and child in that city was ready to fight for their freedom. She thanked me for giving them time to prepare and wished me luck. Then she cut the communication. I thought she was bluffing about the civilians fighting. Humans would not put their young ones in danger. The commander shook his head slowly. I was wrong about that too. When we attacked, the entire city fought back. Not just soldiers, but teachers and shopkeepers and even children old enough to hold weapons. They had turned every building into a fortress and every street into a trap. He walked to the window and stared out at the stars. But that was just the beginning. On the second day of fighting, something impossible happened. The humans disappeared. Not all of them, just most of them. Our sensors showed the city was almost empty. We thought they had evacuated through some secret tunnel. We were half right about the tunnels. Zexthol turned back to the recording device, his eyes wide with remembered fear. Sergeant Ben Parker was the one who figured out the human plan. He had been a miner before joining the military. He knew how to dig. Under Rodriguez's orders, the humans had spent weeks turning the entire city into a maze of underground passages. Every building was connected by tunnels. Every sewer pipe became a highway for human soldiers. The alien commander's voice grew, tense. They would appear from nowhere, attack our troops, and disappear again. A squad of coalition soldiers would be walking down a street when suddenly humans would burst out of the ground like demons. They would kill half our troops and vanish before we could respond. He sat down heavily. Major Dan Sullivan became a nightmare for our forces. He was a big man with red hair and cold blue eyes. Sullivan could appear anywhere in the city within minutes. Our troops started calling him the Tunnel Ghost because you never knew where he would strike next. Zexthul rubbed his main set of hands together nervously. Sullivan held the central marketplace for 18 hours straight. Every time we thought we had killed him, he would pop up somewhere else. He used the bodies of our dead soldiers as cover, building walls of the fallen around his position. When his rifle ran out of ammunition, he took weapons from our troops. When those broke, he used knives. When the knives were gone, he used his bare hands. The commander's voice became almost a whisper, but Sullivan was not fighting alone. The humans had created something we had never seen before. They called it urban warfare, but it was really underground warfare. They knew every tunnel, every hidden passage, every secret way through their city. We were fighting in their home, and they used every advantage. He stood up and began pacing again. Lieutenant Kate Fisher was another one who haunted our dreams. She was young, maybe 25 human years old. Fisher specialized in what humans call psychological warfare. She would leave messages for our troops written in our own language. Messages that told us we were going to die in those tunnels. Zexthul stopped pacing and faced the recording device. But Fisher did more than write scary messages. She would play human music through the city's communication system. Battle songs that made our soldiers nervous and afraid. The worst was something called the Battle Hymn of the Republic. When that song played, we knew humans were about to attack. The alien commander's forearms wrapped around his body. The humans also did something that broke our understanding of civilized warfare. They painted their faces with our blood, not their own blood, but the blood of coalition soldiers they had killed. Corporal Steve Hayes led a group of fighters who covered themselves in blue and green paint mixed with the blood of our fallen. He shuddered at the memory. Hayes and his painted warriors would emerge from the sewers like creatures from a nightmare. They moved silently through our lines, killing sentries and guards without making a sound. Our soldiers started sleeping, in groups because they were afraid of the painted humans in the dark. Zexthul sat back down, his voice growing stronger. After 2 weeks of this underground war, our troops were breaking. These humans fought like no enemy we had ever faced. They knew we were stronger and better armed, but they did not care. Every day brought new attacks from impossible directions. The commander looked directly at the recording device. Captain Rick Chen was the human who finally made me realize what we were really fighting. Chen was an engineer who had designed many of the tunnels under New Geneva. When we captured him during a surface raid, I thought we had finally caught someone who could tell us about the tunnel system. Zexthul's voice grew sad. I interrogated Chen personally. He was badly wounded and should have been weak. Instead, he looked at me with calm eyes and smiled. When I asked about the tunnels, he told me something that changed how I saw this war. The alien commander paused, remembering the conversation. Chen said that humans had been fighting in cities for thousands of years. He said every human child learned stories about heroes who defended their homes against impossible odds. He told me that dying for your home was not death, but honor. Zexthul's hands clenched into fists. Then Chen said something that terrified me. He said the tunnels were not just for hiding. They were for hunting. The humans were not trying to survive our siege. They were trying to kill every coalition soldier in their city. The commander stood up and walked to the far wall. Chen was right. By the third week, we had lost 12,000 troops. 12,000 trained soldiers killed by 8,000 humans fighting in holes in the ground. Our reinforcements were afraid to enter the city. Stories about the tunnel fighters had spread through our entire fleet. He turned back to the recording device. Colonel Rodriguez contacted me again during the fourth week. She looked tired but not defeated. She told me that her people were ready to fight for another month if needed. Then she offered me something that no other enemy had ever offered. Zexthul's voice grew quiet with respect. Rodriguez said that if we withdrew from New Geneva, the humans would let us take our wounded and dead with honor. She said there had been enough killing and that both sides had proven their courage. She was offering us a way to retreat without losing face. The alien commander sat down one final time. I wanted to accept. My troops were broken and afraid. But High Command ordered us to continue the siege. They said surrendering to humans would make the coalition look weak across the galaxy. He looked directly into the recording device. That decision cost us everything. The humans stopped being defensive and became hunters. What happened in the final month of the siege showed us that we were not fighting soldiers anymore. We were fighting something much more dangerous, something that enjoyed the hunt. The recording device's light went dark. Commander Zexthul knew the worst stories were still to come. Commander Zexthul activated the recording device for the third time. His forehands were steadier now, but his voice carried a weight that had not been there before. The debriefing room felt colder as he prepared to explain what he had learned about human nature during his captivity. After the siege of New Geneva ended, I was captured by human forces. I spent 2 months in their prisoner facility on Luna Station. During that time, I spoke with many human soldiers. What I learned there changed everything I thought I knew about warfare and about what drives intelligent beings to fight. The alien commander looked out the window at the stars beyond. The first human I really talked to was Marine Corporal Steve Hayes. He was the painted warrior I mentioned before. Hayes had been wounded in the final battle and was recovering in the medical bay next to where they kept me. He could have ignored me, but instead he started conversations. Zexthul turned back to the recording device. Hayes asked me about my homeworld and my family. He wanted to know about Krillian culture and our history. I thought he was gathering intelligence, but I was wrong. Hayes was genuinely curious about other species. Even after months of brutal warfare, he still saw enemies as people worth understanding. The commander's voice grew thoughtful. Through Hayes, I learned that humans have a concept they call heroism. It is not just about being brave in battle. Heroism means doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. Hayes told me stories about human heroes from their history, people who died to save strangers they had never met. Zexthul sat down and folded his arms. One story that confused me was about a human named Nathan Walsh. During a great war on Earth, Walsh threw himself on an explosive device to save his squad. He died instantly, but his sacrifice saved 12 other soldiers. Hayes said Walsh became a hero because he chose to die for others. The alien commander shook his head slowly. I asked Hayes why Walsh did not just run away and save himself. Hayes looked at me like I had asked why water flows downhill. He said that running away when others needed help was not something a good person could do. He said some things are more important than staying alive. Zexthul's voice grew quieter. That conversation led to many others. I spoke with Navy Lieutenant Kate Fisher, the woman who had conducted psychological warfare during the siege. Fisher explained that humans fight for abstract ideas that they cannot touch or hold. Ideas like justice, freedom, and honor. The commander stood up and began pacing. Fisher told me about the human concept of sacrifice. Not just dying in battle, but giving up personal happiness for the good of others. She had left her family and home to serve in the military because she believed it was her duty to protect people she would never meet. He stopped pacing and faced the recording device directly. But the most disturbing conversation was with Petty Officer Rick Chen. Chen had been part of a human suicide mission during the siege. His job was to stay behind and manually detonate explosives that would destroy a coalition command post. The mission succeeded, but Chen should have died. Zexthal's voice grew tense. Chen survived because another human, Private Julie Barnes, disobeyed orders and went back to rescue him. Barnes carried Chen to safety even though it meant missing the evacuation. When I asked Chen how he felt about nearly dying, he smiled and said he was disappointed the mission had not required his death. The alien commander sat back down, his forearms wrapped around his body. Chen explained that humans have a concept called honor. Honor means doing your duty even when no one is watching and even when it costs you everything. He said dying with honor was better than living with shame. These ideas make no sense to my species, but they are the foundation of human military thinking. Zexthal looked directly at the recording device. Through these conversations, I began to understand what makes humans so dangerous in warfare. They do not fight just to win battles or conquer territory. They fight to prove that their ideas about right and wrong are worth dying for. This makes them unpredictable and terrifying. The commander's voice grew stronger. I also learned about human pack bonding. Sergeant Julie Barnes, the woman who saved Chen, explained this to me. She said humans form emotional connections with their fellow soldiers that are stronger than family bonds. These connections make them fight harder when their friends are in danger. He stood up and walked to the window again. Barnes told me about a battle where she saw her squad leader, Sergeant Tony Miller, get surrounded by coalition forces. Instead of following orders to retreat, Barnes and 3 other humans charged into the enemy to save Miller. They fought against 20 coalition soldiers to rescue one man. Zexthal turned back to the recording device. When I asked Barnes why she risked her life for one person, she said that Miller had saved her life 6 months earlier. She said humans do not abandon their friends, even when logic says they should. This loyalty makes human military units much stronger than their numbers suggest. The alien commander's voice grew thoughtful. But the most frightening thing I learned was about human anger. Corporal Hayes told me about something called righteous fury. This happens when humans see injustice or cruelty. Their anger makes them stronger and faster than normal, but it also makes them more dangerous. Zexthal sat down and leaned forward. Hayes described a battle where he saw coalition forces attacking human civilians. The sight of innocent people being hurt triggered this righteous fury in him and his squad. Hayes said he felt no fear, no pain, no tiredness. He only felt the need to stop the injustice. The commander's hands clenched into fists. That squad of 8 humans killed 43 coalition soldiers in less than 10 minutes. Hayes said he did not remember most of the battle. The fury had taken control of his actions. When it was over, he found himself covered in enemy blood with no memory of how it got there. Zexthal's voice grew quiet with fear. I asked Hayes if this fury was common among humans. He said it happened to every human soldier when they saw something that violated their sense of right and wrong. He said the fury was why humans fight so hard to protect civilians and prisoners. The alien commander stood up and began pacing again. Through Lieutenant Fisher, I learned that humans study warfare like scientists study nature. They have thousands of years of military history, and they learn from every battle. Fisher said humans write books about famous battles and teach military tactics in schools. He stopped pacing and faced the recording device. Fisher showed me human military manuals, books that explained every type of warfare from small unit tactics to planetary conquest. She said every human soldier studies these books and learns from the mistakes and successes of previous generations. Zexthal's voice grew respectful. But the most shocking thing Fisher told me was that humans deliberately limit their own military power. She said human governments have laws that prevent their military from using the most destructive weapons. She said humans could destroy entire planets, but they choose not to. The commander sat down one final time. When I asked Fisher why humans would limit their own power, she explained about human ethics. She said humans believe that some victories are not worth winning if they require doing evil things. She said humans would rather lose a war than win by destroying innocent life. Zexthel looked directly into the recording device. These conversations taught me that humans are not just dangerous because they are good fighters. They are dangerous because they fight for reasons that make them willing to sacrifice everything. They fight for ideas that are more important to them than their own lives. The alien commander's voice grew heavy with understanding. A species that will die for abstract concepts like justice and freedom is a species that cannot be defeated by conventional military force. You can kill their bodies, but you cannot kill their ideas. And as long as those ideas survive, humans will keep fighting. He paused, remembering his final conversation with the human prisoners. Before I was released, Corporal Hayes asked me a question that I still think about every day. He asked me what I would die for. I could not answer him then, and I still cannot answer him now. That is why humans are winning this war. The recording device went dark as Commander Zexthel prepared to tell the most terrifying part of his story. Commander Zexthel's hand shook as he turned on the recording device for the fourth time. The red light seemed brighter now, more demanding. He knew this part of his testimony would be the hardest to tell and the hardest for the coalition leadership to believe. His voice was barely a whisper when he began. What I am about to tell you happened at Luna Station, Earth's moon base. This battle broke our will to fight. It showed us that we were not facing normal soldiers, but something far more terrifying. It was the moment we realized that humans do not just fight wars. They create art from warfare itself. The alien commander stood up and walked to the far corner of the room, as if distance could protect him from the memories. Luna Station was supposed to be an easy target. Intelligence reports said it was a research facility with light defenses. 200 human defenders against 5,000 of our best assault troops. The mathematics were perfect. We expected to capture the station in 4 hours. Zexthel turned back to face the recording device, his 4 eyes wide with remembered terror. Admiral Frank Torres commanded the human defense. Torres was 63 years old, far past the age when most species retire from active combat. Our analysts said he was too old to be dangerous. They had never seen an old human warrior before. The commander's voice grew stronger as he continued. General Beth Clark was Torres's second in command. Clark was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother, not a military leader. Together, Torres and Clark made decisions that violated every principle of military logic we knew. He sat back down and folded his arms across his chest. When we began our assault, the humans did something impossible. With only 200 defenders facing 5,000 attackers, they launched a counterattack. Not a defensive action, but an actual assault on our forces. It should have been suicide. Zexthel's voice grew quiet with awe. Gunnery Sergeant Tony Miller led the boarding party that attacked our flagship. Miller was a giant of a man, over 2 meters tall with arms like tree trunks. But his size was not what made him terrifying. It was his complete calm in the middle of chaos. The alien commander stood up and began pacing around the small room. Miller and 12 other humans launched themselves from Luna Station in small assault pods. They attached to our flagship's hull and began cutting their way inside. We had 300 soldiers on that ship. Miller's team had 13 people, including himself. He stopped pacing and stared at the recording device. What happened next still gives me nightmares. Miller fought his way through 17 decks of heavily armed defenders. He moved through our ship like death itself, killing trained soldiers, with such efficiency that it seemed casual. Our troops started calling him the Silent Reaper because he never spoke during battle. Zexthel's voice cracked slightly. But Miller was not silent because he was focused on fighting. He was silent because killing coalition soldiers required no effort from him. Fighting us was so easy for Miller that he did not need to think about it. His hands moved automatically while his mind planned the next attack. The commander sat down heavily in his chair. I watched the security recordings later. Miller would enter a room full of our soldiers and clear it in seconds. He moved like he was dancing, flowing from one opponent to the next without pause. Every movement had purpose. Every action led to death. Zexthal's 4 hands clenched into fists. The most terrifying part was Miller's face during combat. He showed no anger, no fear, no excitement. His expression was completely calm, like he was performing routine maintenance instead of slaughtering dozens of trained warriors. He looked bored by the whole thing. The alien commander's voice grew quieter. Miller reached our bridge after 37 minutes of continuous fighting. He had killed 89 coalition soldiers without taking a single serious wound. When he burst through the bridge doors, our captain tried to surrender. Miller just looked at him with those calm eyes and kept fighting. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the darkness. But Miller was not fighting alone. While he carved through our flagship, other human teams were attacking our support vessels. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led an assault on our ammunition ship. Captain Dave Brown attacked our command vessel. Every human team succeeded in their missions. Zexthal turned back to the recording device. What made these attacks so effective was not just human fighting skill. It was their complete understanding of how we think and how we fight. They anticipated our responses and planned for our tactics before we made them. The commander's voice grew respectful despite himself. Captain Brown's team captured our fleet communications center in 12 minutes. They did not destroy it or steal information. Instead, they began broadcasting human music through our entire fleet. The same battle songs that had terrorized our PIM troops during the siege of New Geneva. He sat back down, his arms wrapped around his body. But the music was not just psychological warfare. While our soldiers were distracted by the strange sounds, human teams were planting explosives throughout our ships. They turned our own vessels into weapons against us. Zexthal's voice grew tight with fear. The coordinated explosions destroyed 6 of our largest ships and damaged 12 others. But the humans timed the explosions to disable rather than destroy. They wanted to capture our vessels, not just sink them. The alien commander looked directly at the recording device. This was when I realized that humans do not just fight wars. They choreograph them like artists creating masterpieces. Every action had multiple purposes. Every attack served several goals. They fought like they could see the entire battle from above and plan every detail in advance. His voice grew quieter as he remembered the final phase of the battle. General Clark contacted our remaining ships after the explosions. She appeared on our communication screens looking perfectly calm, like she was hosting a social gathering instead of commanding a battle. Clark offered to accept our surrender and treat our wounded with dignity. Zexthal stood up and began pacing again. But Clark also delivered a message that changed everything we thought we knew about humans. She said that Luna Station's defense was just a training exercise for her troops. She said they had been holding back their full capabilities to make the battle more interesting. The commander stopped pacing and faced the recording device directly. Clark told us that human military doctrine included something called proportional response. She said humans deliberately matched their fighting intensity to their opponent's capabilities. They had been fighting us at what they considered our level, not their full potential. Zexthal's voice grew heavy with understanding. Then Clark showed us recordings of human military exercises, training battles where human soldiers fought against simulated enemies far more dangerous than coalition forces. The humans had been preparing for wars against opponents much stronger than us. He sat down one final time, his 4 arms limp at his sides. Admiral Torres appeared on the communication screen next to Clark. This old human male looked at us with eyes that had seen decades of warfare. Torres said something that ended our will to continue fighting. The alien commander's voice became barely audible. Torres told us that humans had been fighting wars for over 10,000 years. He said they had perfected warfare against the most dangerous enemy possible, other humans. He said that compared to human civil wars, fighting alien species was almost relaxing. Zexthal looked directly into the recording device one final time. Torres explained that humans had weapons that could destroy entire star systems, but they chose not to use them against us. He said humans preferred conventional warfare because it was more sporting and gave their enemies a chance to surrender with honor. The commander's voice grew flat with shock. That was when we understood the truth. Humans had not been fighting to their full capacity. They had been playing with us like adults playing games with children. The Coalition's mighty military had been defeated by humans who were not even trying their hardest. He paused, letting the words sink in. Torres offered us one final choice. We could surrender now and be treated with respect, or we could continue, fighting and face human warfare without any restraints. He said he preferred the first option because he liked us and did not want to hurt us unnecessarily. The recording device went dark as Commander Zexthul prepared to deliver his final warning about the human species. Commander Zexthul activated the recording device for the final time. His 4 hands were steady now, but his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. The debriefing room felt smaller as he prepared to deliver his ultimate warning about humanity to the Coalition leadership. What I am about to tell you is the most important information in this entire testimony. During the peace negotiations, I learned the truth about human military capability. What we faced in battle was not their army at full strength. It was humans, playing at war while keeping their most terrible weapons locked away. The alien commander looked directly at the recording device, his large black eyes reflecting the red recording light. General Paul Wright led the human peace delegation. Wright was a quiet man with silver hair and calm blue eyes. He looked like a teacher or scientist, not a military leader. But when Wright spoke about warfare, his words carried the authority of someone who understood death better than life itself. Zexthul stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the stars. Ambassador Helen Brooks accompanied Wright to the negotiations. Brooks was a diplomat, not a soldier, but she knew more about human military history than our best intelligence officers. Through Brooks, I learned that humans have been fighting wars for their entire existence as a species. The commander turned, back to face the recording device. Brooks explained that human civilization was built on warfare. She said humans had fought over territory, resources, ideas, and religion for thousands of years. She said the longest period of peace in human history lasted only 26 years, and that was considered miraculous. His voice grew thoughtful as he continued. But the most disturbing thing Brooks told me was about human restraint. She said that during their greatest wars, humans had possessed weapons that could destroy their entire planet. They chose not to use these weapons because they wanted their species to survive. Zexthul sat back down, his forearms folded across his chest. General Wright showed me recordings of human military exercises, training scenarios where human soldiers fought against simulated enemies with technology far superior to Coalition forces. The humans had been preparing for wars against opponents who could destroy star systems. The alien commander's voice grew quiet with awe. Wright explained that humans had developed something called escalation doctrine. This meant they would match their fighting intensity to their enemy's capabilities. Against primitive opponents, humans used simple weapons. Against advanced enemies, they would use advanced weapons. He leaned forward in his chair. I asked Wright what weapons humans would use against an enemy that threatened their entire species. Wright looked at me with those calm blue eyes and said that humans had devices that could make stars explode. He said they could turn entire solar systems into weapons. Zexthul's voice cracked slightly. Wright was not bragging or making threats. He was simply stating facts. He showed me technical documents about something called stellar engineering. Humans had learned how to manipulate the nuclear reactions inside stars. They could make a sun burn hotter or colder. They could make it explode or collapse into a black hole. The commander stood up and began pacing around the small room. But Wright said humans rarely used their most powerful weapons because they considered it unsporting. He said humans preferred fair fights where both sides had a chance to show courage and skill. He said destroying an enemy too quickly was not honorable. Zexthul stopped pacing and faced the recording device directly. Ambassador Brooks then told me about human military history. She described wars where humans had killed hundreds of millions of their own species. Wars that lasted for years and covered entire continents. She said humans had learned to fight by fighting each other. His voice grew heavy with understanding. Brooks explained that every coalition tactic we used against humans had been used by humans against other humans centuries before. She said, human military academies studied ancient battles where humans had defeated enemies using the same strategies we thought were new. The alien commander sat back down, his hands clenched into fists. The worst revelation came when I asked Wright about human casualties during our war. I expected him to be angry about the soldiers we had killed. Instead, Wright thanked me for giving his troops valuable combat experience. Zexthal's voice became barely audible. Wright said that fighting the Coalition had been useful training for his soldiers. He said our war had taught humans how to fight in space and on alien worlds. He said we had helped them prepare for enemies they might face in the future. The commander looked directly into the recording device. I asked Wright what enemies could be more dangerous than the Coalition. Wright showed me star charts of unexplored space beyond human territory. He said humans expected to encounter species that might be hostile and more advanced than both humans and the Coalition. His voice grew respectful despite himself. Wright explained that humans always prepared for the worst possible enemy. He said human military planning assumed they would eventually fight opponents with superior technology and greater numbers. He said defeating the Coalition was just practice for these future wars. Zexthal stood up one final time and walked to the center of the room. But the most terrifying thing Wright told me was about human unity. He said that despite thousands of years of fighting each other, humans would stop all internal conflicts if an external enemy threatened their species. He said human civil wars ended immediately when outside forces attacked human worlds. The alien commander's voice grew stronger. Wright showed me historical examples of this human behavior. Enemy nations that had been killing each other for decades would become allies within hours if a common threat appeared. He said humans had an instinct to unite against foreign enemies that overrode all other considerations. He paused, letting the implications sink in. During our final meeting, Colonel Mary Davis joined the peace negotiations. Davis was the human liaison officer assigned to oversee the treaty implementation. She was a pleasant woman who spoke about military matters like she was discussing the weather. Zexthal's voice grew quiet with fear. Davis casually mentioned human military doctrines that I had never heard of, things like mutually assured destruction and total war. When I asked her to explain these concepts, Davis smiled and said they were old human ideas about how to end conflicts quickly. The commander's hands began shaking again. Davis explained that mutually assured destruction meant building weapons so terrible that using them would destroy both sides in a conflict. She said humans had lived with these weapons for centuries, always ready to destroy their own planet rather than surrender to enemies. His voice became almost a whisper. Total war was even more frightening. Davis said it meant using every resource and weapon available to completely destroy an enemy's ability to fight. She said total war included destroying civilian populations, industrial centers, and even the enemy's home planets. Zexthal looked directly at the recording device for the final time. Davis told me that humans had never used total war against alien species because they considered it excessive. She said humans preferred to give their enemies chances to surrender with dignity. She said destroying entire civilizations was not something humans enjoyed, but it was something they could do if necessary. The alien commander's voice grew flat, with absolute certainty. I asked Davis what would happen if an alien species tried to exterminate humanity. Davis looked at me with kind eyes and said that humans would respond by exterminating every trace of that species from the galaxy. She said humans would hunt down every member of a genocidal enemy across every star system, until none remained. He paused, remembering her final words. Davis said that humans hoped never to use their full military capability against any species. She said humans preferred to make friends rather than graves. But she also said that any species that threatened human survival would discover why humans had conquered their own planet before reaching for the stars. Zexthal reached toward the recording device, then stopped. My recommendation to the Coalition leadership is simple. Treat humans as equals, and never as enemies. Make them our allies and learn from their knowledge. A species that can wage war with such precision and restraint is far more dangerous than one driven by simple bloodlust. His voice grew urgent with his final warning. Humans fight not because they must, but because they choose to. That choice makes them the most terrifying military force the galaxy has ever known. We survived our war with them only because they allowed us to survive. Remember that truth and never forget it. The recording device's red light went dark for the final time. Commander Zexthul sat back in his chair, knowing that his testimony would change how the Coalition viewed humanity forever. The humans had won not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through something far more powerful: the choice to show mercy to a defeated enemy.